Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller suspense films from 2014, titled No Good Deed. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens with a chilling news report about a notorious criminal, Colin Evans. Once the prime suspect in the horrifying disappearance and presumed murder of 5 young women, Colin was arrested, but managed to slip through the fingers of law enforcement, evading capture for months. But his freedom came to a brutal end after a violent bar fight turned deadly, leading to the murder of a man. Though the 5 women's fates were never officially tied to him, Colin was convicted for the bar killing and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Now, after serving just 5 years, this dangerous man is eligible to request parole. In the present, Colin is at the courthouse, giving testimony to the parole board members. He claims that bar fights often get out of hand, and he could have easily died that day. He also expresses his regret for that man's death, saying he's now a humble and changed man. Unfortunately, his carefully crafted facade cracks when one of the board members, a doctor, steps in. He reveals that Colin is a skilled liar, extremely intelligent, who becomes violent whenever things do not go his way. Moreover, the doctor highlights the bar fight, where Colin beat the guy to death, simply because the man looked his girlfriend in the eye. Upon hearing this, an upset Colin tries to intervene but is ordered to sit down. The doctor lets other members decide freely, but mentions that the families of the 5 women are gathered outside, praying that Colin will not be released. This makes Colin even angrier, and, in the end, the chairman informs Colin that the vote must be unanimous, and his parole will not be reconsidered for another 5 years. Later, Colin is being transported back to prison in a van, accompanied by a guard and a driver. But on the way, he appears to have a bloody nose and asks for help. The guard approaches to give him a tissue, but Colin seizes the opportunity to grab his gun and point it at his head. The driver, now on high alert, immediately draws his own weapon, but Colin calmly tells him to put the gun down, saying he doesn't want any trouble, he just wants to get out of here. Hearing this, the terrified driver complies and sets the gun down. But unfortunately, Colin wastes no time in shooting both of them in cold blood. In the following scene, we meet a woman named Terry, who's doing her best to balance life with her daughter Ryan, and newborn, Sam. Some workers are renovating her house, but they leave early, because a storm is approaching. Moments later, her best friend, Meg, arrives and notices how overwhelmed Terry is with everything on her plate. She comments that Terry's husband, Jeffrey, should show more appreciation, and put in more effort in their relationship. At this point, Jeffrey returns home. Terry informs Meg that Jeffrey is leaving for the night, as he's going on a golf trip with his dad. This gives Meg an idea. She suggests having a girls' night and getting drunk, to which Terry immediately agrees. After Meg leaves, Terry hugs her husband, but he feels disgusted by the breast milk on her clothes. It is evident that their marriage is going through a rough patch, as Jeffrey barely pays attention to his wife. Nonetheless, he reassures her that he loves her, but reluctantly agrees when she suggests going on a trip. Meanwhile, we see Colin sitting in a car and stalking a woman named Alexis. She arrives at a cafe and meets up with a guy, which makes Colin visibly jealous. Sometime later, Alexis returns home, and Colin follows her inside. Shock washes over her, and it turns out the two were lovers before he went to prison. Colin apologizes for his actions, saying that he missed her deeply, and wants to get back together. He suggests that they make fake passports and run away to get married. Alexis is visibly terrified, but she agrees, fearing what he might do if she refuses. Just then, a sudden buzz from her phone shifts the tension. Colin asks if it's from her boyfriend, which she denies. But then he starts reading a note he found in the house that says, "Didn't want to wake you up because you look so beautiful when you sleep." Alexis apologizes, and admits she tried to wait for him but couldn't. Furious, Colin takes out a stack of letters he found, ones he had sent her from jail but never received a response to. Fearing for her life, Alexis grabs her phone and rushes upstairs, with Colin hot on her heels. She enters her bedroom and frantically tries to call the cops, but Colin catches up and throws the phone away. He starts accusing her of dating other people while he was locked away in prison. Finally, an overwhelmed Alexis yells that she has been with other men, and slept right in this bed. This makes Colin erupt with anger, and her voice begins ringing in his head. Colin then apologizes, expressing how much he missed her. But he also snaps her neck before violently striking her, until the poor woman dies. Later that night, a heavy storm begins to brew, and we see Colin driving through the pouring rain. He recalls what the doctor said earlier in the courtroom, which intensifies his anger. This causes him to lose control of his vehicle and crash into a tree. Colin, who is slightly injured, steps out of the car. The vicious man begins walking through the storm, until he comes across a house. Elsewhere, we see Terry preparing dinner at her house when she hears the doorbell ring. She goes to open the door, and is shocked to see this strange man, who is none other than Colin. He explains that he got into a minor accident, and asks for her phone to call a tow truck. Being kind, Terry gives him a phone, and Colin pretends to call someone. He then explains that the truck will take some time to arrive, and decides to wait outside in the rain. But as he's about to leave, Terry feels bad for him, and invites him into the house, which he agrees to. Terry notices a wound on his forehead, and grabs a first aid kit to treat it. She even introduces him to her daughter, and Colin asks if she's her only child. Terry reveals that she also has a little boy, Sam, who is sleeping in the nursery. While she is treating his injuries, he asks about her husband, and Terry lies, claiming that he will be home shortly. Afterward, Terry gives Colin dry clothes, and he asks about her husband's profession. She reveals that he's a lawyer, and they met in law school. She also mentions that she used to be a prosecutor in the homicide division, but she left after becoming a mother. Later, when Terry asks about his relationship status, Colin reflects on the moment he killed Alexis. He then responds that he used to have a fiancée, but she cheated on him. Terry feels sorry for him, and says that marriage isn't that great either. She reveals how she used to be strong and powerful, but now her husband sees her differently. Upon hearing this, Colin begins to flatter her, telling her that she is still beautiful and fierce. Not long after, the doorbell rings, and Terry thinks it's the tow truck people. But it turns out to be Meg, who has shown up for their girls' night, almost forgot about it. Terry introduces her to Colin, and explains his situation, and he is now waiting for the tow truck. An excited Meg then takes out the wine she brought and suggests they can all share it. Of course, Meg thinks Colin is good looking, and she casually asks Colin where he lives, so he mentions a street called River Road. Meg reveals that she's a realtor, and knows almost everyone in that area. She also asks for his exact address, which makes Colin visibly nervous. But then suddenly, a broken branch crashes through the kitchen window, distracting them away from the conversation. After Colin patches up the window, the three settle in, and begin drinking wine. Meg, growing bolder with each sip, starts flirting with Colin. He watches her closely, and suddenly asks if she's the type who avoids settling down. But she casually replies that she'll only commit if she meets the right person. The two women then begin telling the story of how they met, during which Colin zones out, and recalls how he killed Alexis. Soon after, Terry rushes upstairs to soothe her crying baby, while Meg and Colin slip into the garage and start smoking. The mood is relaxed, until Meg suddenly turns to him, and asks if something is going on between him and Terry. Without hesitation, he says they're having an affair. A stunned Meg cannot believe Terry didn't tell her, so Colin tries to make her even more upset, by saying that Terry might not think of her as a best friend as she thought they were. Upon hearing this, Meg decides to find out the truth and calls for Terry. But
Terry! Hey!
Colin suddenly attacks her with a shovel and silences her forever. Not long after, when Terry comes downstairs, Colin tells her that Meg didn't want to stay and just left. A surprised Terry wonders if her friend was upset, and decides to call her. But then, her eyes land on Meg's umbrella, which is still at the house. A cold dread creeps up her spine, but she forces herself to stay calm. Terry then heads to the kitchen to call the cops, but to her disbelief, the landline isn't working. Turns out Colin has unplugged all the wires. Even worse, she notices that he has taken all the knives. At this moment, all the lights in the house suddenly go out. Terry calls out for Colin, but he is nowhere to be seen. When the lights return, the first thing she does is rush to check on her kids. Baby Sam is fine, but she finds Colin playing with Ryan in her room. Terry also notices the gun behind him, and urges him to leave her daughter alone. While putting Ryan to bed, Terry sees that Colin has given her daughter a necklace as a gift. She throws it back at the psycho, and leads him out of the room. While the two are heading downstairs, Terry grabs a fire extinguisher, and uses every ounce of her strength to attack Colin from behind. She rushes upstairs to grab her kids, but the psycho gets up and immediately orders her to put the kids back down, which Terry has no choice but to oblige. Following this, Colin points a gun at her, and forces her to go to the bathroom with him. He then strips naked, and calmly cleans himself up in front of her. Afterward, he grabs some clothes from the closet and urges Terry to put them on. He also threatens her with the gun, and humiliates her by forcing her to undress. Moments later, while Colin grabs something to wear, Terry locks herself in a room where, thankfully, a telephone is working. She frantically calls 911 and reports the entire situation to them. But the psycho soon breaks inside, leaving a desperate Terry with no choice but to grab a nearby knife and slash his abdomen before running away. Despite being wounded, Colin follows her and eventually corners her in the kitchen downstairs. Here Terry reveals that she's already called the cops, and it's over for him. She pleads with him to leave before they arrive, so no one has to suffer anymore. But the madman has another insane idea in mind. He orders her to grab the kids, so they can all leave together. With no other option, Terry obliges and rushes to get her kids. As they reach the garage, she comes across a harrowing sight, Meg's lifeless body lying there. Despite this, Terry holds back her emotions, and gets in her car, which she begins driving under Colin's instructions. On the way, Terry tries to convince him that there's still time, as he can get out of the car and leave them alone. She claims the cops will eventually track her vehicle and find them, but an annoyed Colin orders her to shut up. Soon, Terry spots a police car in the distance and quickly flashes her lights when Colin doesn't look in front. Within moments, the sirens wail, and the patrol car speeds toward them, forcing her to pull over. When Colin sees this, he coldly warns Terry to stay calm and act normal, or the baby will suffer the consequences. An officer steps out of the car and begins to interrogate them. When he inquires about Colin's injury, the psycho claims it was caused by a tree branch that crashed through the window. But then, a bored Ryan innocently asks where her dad is, and when they are going home. The cop senses that something is definitely wrong, and asks Terry to step out of the car for a conversation. He then questions what's happening, but a frightened Terry claims that the man is actually her lover, and they're planning to spend time together since her husband is out of town. The cop says it's none of his business, but advises her not to involve the kids in this. He then asks if she deliberately flashed her lights to get his attention, and if her life is in danger. Meanwhile, Colin places Sam in the car seat and starts preparing his gun. Here Terry whispers to the cop that she can't say anything, and he understands the situation. But before he can do anything,
don't move. Stay right there!
Colin shoots the cop to death. Terry watches in horror as Colin drags the officer's lifeless body into a ditch. He also accuses Terry of being responsible for the man's death, and forces her to drive away from the scene. Soon, Colin takes them to Alexa's house, where Terry puts the kids to bed in one of the rooms. She assures Ryan that there's nothing to worry about and that they're just having a sleepover. After that, Colin forces Terry into the bathroom, demanding she find a first aid kit to treat his wound. During this, she is shocked to see Alexis's dead body, so Colin introduces her to Alexis, explaining that she was his ex-fiancée who cheated on him. Just then, Terry's car begins ringing outside due to the heavy storm. Colin tries to turn it off using the keys, but it's not working. And so, he ties Terry's hands and feet, before heading outside to turn off the car manually. Moments later, Terry hears a phone ringing near Alexis' dead body. She desperately grabs a broken vase and saws through her restraints until she's finally free. But when she picks up the phone and hears the voice on the other end, she freezes in shock. It's Jeffrey. He says he's been waiting for her at the hotel all night, but she hasn't shown up. In a shocking twist, we learn that Jeffrey is the man Alexis has been dating, and Colin deliberately went to their house to confront him. Feeling betrayed, Terry tells her husband that his goddamn girlfriend is dead, and he's stunned to hear her voice. She insists he call the police and abruptly hangs up the phone. She then rushes to the children's room and decides to escape through the window. Terry uses a blanket as a rope in her desperate attempt to save herself and her children. When Colin returns and sees Terry missing, he rushes to the children's room, where he notices the blanket rope hanging from the window. And so, he hurries outside to catch up to them. However, it turns out to be just a ruse, as Terry and the kids are still in the house. She locks her children in a closet, and grabs a knife for self-defense before quietly heading upstairs. When Colin doesn't find her outside, he begins looking for Terry downstairs. Seeing this, she intentionally makes a noise and lures him toward her. And then, when he arrives upstairs, she plunges the knife in his already wounded abdomen. Here, Terry reveals that Jeffrey called Alexis, and she knows about their affair and why Colin did this. Just as he demands to know where Jeffrey is, Ryan suddenly appears, and Terry kicks his balls. The two get into an intense fight and, as he attempts to strangle her, Terry uses an object to knock him unconscious. But as the woman tries to leave, Colin wakes up again and grabs her feet. The two begin scuffling once more, during which Colin violently slams her. When it seems like all is over for Terry, she manages to reach Colin's gun and shoots the psycho several times, until he falls out the window, to his death. In the aftermath, several police cars show up outside the house, along with Jeffrey. The cheating husband immediately apologizes, and tries to explain that his relationship with Alexis was a mistake, and that she never meant anything to him. However, Terry realizes he was the reason she and her children were nearly killed. The poor woman then walks away, finally ending their marriage for good. In the final scene, some time has passed, Terry and the kids are moving into a new house. Just then, a nanny bearing a resemblance to Meg arrives to take the kids to the park. We see that Terry has finally regained control of her life, and is returning to her profession, reclaiming her strength and independence. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.